Vault Veritas SCP Files. Episode 90 Mr. Spooky. Incident Report 1819-148, the 148th known report related to SCP-1819. Object Class: Euclid. Risk Assessment Level: Moderate. Reported by Dr. June Cruson. Report made January 7th, 2024. SCP-1819 is a disease, and it is not to be taken lightly. The good news is that anyone reading this report is well past the age at which it can affect you. Of course, that means the bad news is that it only manifests in children, always between the ages of 4 and 13. Among Foundation personnel, SCP-1819 has sometimes been referred to as nyctophobia made manifest. Affected children experience an anomalous physical sensitivity to darkness. When a subject spends 4 or more hours in an environment measuring less than 0.1 lux, they begin to develop a range of varying symptoms: pain, itching, redness, swelling, blistering, and peeling of the skin. The easiest way to describe it is this: the children develop what appears to be a rash or a sunburn from the dark. The longer they remain without light, the worse the damage becomes. Over time, repeated exposure dramatically increases the likelihood of malignant melanoma. Most affected children who have been designated SCP-1819-X, they do not survive to puberty. Naturally, the Foundation has conducted extensive testing. We're not exactly in the habit of letting young children die anomalously. Genetic sequencing revealed an entirely novel retroviral element present only in affected skin tissue. These sequences produce a previously unknown enzyme which catalyzes the formation of pyrimidine dimers, a genotoxic modification of DNA normally caused by ultraviolet radiation. Hence, the cancer. Curiously, however, exposure to visible light completely halts the enzyme's activity. In sufficiently bright environments, the process simply stops. Which is why all SCP-1819-X instances are now kept under constant illumination. But before anyone suggests that we look into antiviral medications, we've tried it. It does not work. SCP-1819, you see, does not spread like a normal virus. There are no detectable viral particles. There is no risk of airborne transmission. There are no contaminated fluids to be wary of. You simply cannot catch it the way you would catch a cold. Instead, infection appears to originate from the fear itself, from the nyctophobia, from children who share their fear with other children, who speak about the dark, about what they believe lives in it. They are the ones who often pass the condition along, especially if they describe the figure. Every single subject reports the same thing, you see. A shape standing in the darkness. Tall, black, almost indistinguishable from the dark around it. And yet, somehow unmistakably real and excruciatingly vivid. And always with the same feature, a single eye, bright, lidless, and always watching. Mr. Spooky. When I was 9 years old, I met him too. Before that point, I had made something of a name for myself as a particularly logical child. My parents were both scientists and Foundation researchers themselves, and had instilled in me a disdain for the normal fantasies of youth. They were kind people overall, but they feared the effects of fairy tales and imaginative play. I think they worried it would corrupt me from truly understanding the world, and the anomalies that work here, preying on those who could not distinguish reality from fantasy. So it was that I became the sort of child who took a certain amount of pride in dismantling the creative games of my peers. I was haughty and pompous, quick to talk down to others, and even quicker to insert what I perceived as a superior intellect into any conversation. I must have been quite insufferable. And so it was that I reached the age of 9 with not a single friend to keep me company. I'd decided at the time that nobody else could handle the truth, and that I alone knew the best among my peers. A rather embarrassing conclusion, in hindsight. I remember the day Matilda joined my classroom. She was a pale child, quiet and shy. She kept her long brown hair brushed forward across her face, so dramatically that I often wondered how she managed to see anything at all. The other children took an immediate dislike to her. I would often see her walking the hallways with wads of gum tangled in her hair, the other students whispering and laughing as she hurried past with her head down. And during class, she rarely listened to the teacher. Instead, she filled page after page of her pink-ringed notebook, scribbling endlessly, her pen moving in tight, looping motions over and over. It was about 2 weeks in that my curiosity finally overtook my desire to avoid the bullies who had claimed her as their favorite target. I approached her during recess. She was sitting alone by herself on a bench, still scribbling madly on her page. I introduced myself and, without really waiting for her reply, asked her rather bluntly what she was doing, and what it was she found so fascinating in that notebook of hers. When she looked up, her hair slipped away from her face, and I saw her huge, terrified eyes. They were rimmed in black circles, and I realized she had not slept well in many a night. But there was something else, too. A red, painful rash spread across her left cheek, stretching from her jawline almost to her eye. It looked very much like a burn. A sunburn, I thought at the time. "I'm drawing Mr. Spooky," she said quietly. She turned the notebook towards me, and there he was. He was a huge mass of swirled pen strokes where she had scribbled hundreds or perhaps thousands of overlapping loops, darkening his body so intensely the page must have been heavy with ink. The figure was little more than a black mass, with a single bright eye in the center, sharply contrasted. As I stared at it, the lines seemed almost to shift and ripple. I was so mesmerized by her drawing, I couldn't drag my eyes away, even as she began to recite her silly fairy tale nonsense. It was something about a boogeyman who visited her at night, in the dark. How it whispered to her, how it understood her, recognized her loneliness, how it wanted to share a gift with her. After all, that's just what friends do. I remember thinking it was absolute nonsense. I pitied her for believing something so childish, and I opened my mouth to tell her exactly that. But before I could do so, the eye in that drawing moved. To this day, I swear, I saw that eye twist and swivel to fixate on me. After that, I kept my distance from Matilda. I ignored her when she tried to speak to me again. I avoided her in the halls. I pretended not to notice when the other children continued tormenting her. I told myself she was simply delusional, that she had spent too much time reading frightening stories, that her fear of the dark had convinced her something lived there. How ridiculous. There was nothing in the dark that was not already present in the light. It was 6 days after our conversation that I met him for myself. In those 6 days, I had thought about Matilda often. Every time the memory of that drawing returned to me, the way its eye had seemed to move, I had to carefully remind myself how absurd the whole thing was, how childish. I had simply let her story get inside my head. That was all. I was 9 years old, far too old to be imagining monsters in the dark. I had just convinced myself of that once again when I turned my room light off to hop into bed. I turned to make the familiar walk back to my bed, reaching out through the darkness the way I always did. And there was something standing there, directly behind my bed. I still, to this day, have trouble describing it properly. I didn't see him, not as I do the objects around me now. There was not even an outline. But I knew he was there all the same. I could sense him. And somehow I could just feel that he looked exactly as he had in that drawing. Massive, misshapen, and with a single wide eye that was now fixed upon me. It's nothing, I told myself, even as my heart began to hammer in my ears. It's just my room, same as always. Matilda's story had simply gotten inside my thoughts again. Yes, that seemed right. For a moment, my heartbeat slowed. That's right. I had just been thinking about Matilda and her creature, and now here he was, just a trick of the mind. Mr. Oh, what's that silly name she had called him?
Mr. Spooky.
Right. Yes. Mr. Spooky. I tried not to think about how the name seemed to just arrive in my mind, unbidden. I tried not to imagine how the center of that black mass had folded inward slightly, creating a dark, gaping mouth. Mr. Spooky. A silly name for a silly fairy tale. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to walk right up to it, climb into bed, and close my eyes. If I just ignored it, everything would resolve itself. But the longer I stood there, staring into the darkness, the more real it became. I rationalized it to myself, over and over, yet my hands still shook. My feet stayed rooted to the spot, and my heartbeat drummed so loudly it overshadowed my thoughts. It was just a dark room that I knew. And yet, how could I truly know what was in it? How could anyone know what existed in a space they could not see? That is when I felt it lean forwards. It shifted itself out over my bed, and I could feel it lift one arm of its bulk, first towards it, and then towards me, in the universal gesture of giving. In that moment, I understood exactly what Matilda had meant by a gift, and I knew immediately that I didn't want it. I tried to tell it. I tried to explain, but the fear and disbelief shoved the words down in my throat. And then, all at once, the thing was gone. I didn't blink. It didn't move. It just suddenly blinked back out of existence, which made it very easy to pretend it had never been there at all. I took a deep breath and told myself yet again that it had never been there. I didn't need to turn on the light. That would be ridiculous. It would mean admitting that the thing had existed, and I knew that couldn't be true. It was several minutes before I could coax myself across the room once again and enter into my bed. And by then, the itching had begun. It started as a light tingle on my left arm, just a faint ripple of irritation across the base of my palm. But between the mild discomfort and whatever had just occurred, I knew sleep would not find me. I waited in the dark, in the night, and the itching deepened. Gradually, faintly, over hours. It grew, spreading down into my fingertips and then up into my forearm, a faint march of itching that swelled into a painful burn. After 5 hours, I finally convinced myself that turning on the lights now would not admit defeat. It was a strategic choice now, just to make sure I hadn't hit my arm on something getting into bed. When the lights flickered on overhead, it was immediate relief. The itching ceased, but the damage remained. And the moment I touched it and felt a burst of pain flare across my skin, I knew that it had been real. This was no fairy tale. My mother took me to see my doctor in the morning. They were quick to pronounce it a sunburn, and even quicker still to wave away my story of Mr. Spooky as a simple childhood fantasy. I crossly told them that I did not experience those, and of course, they dismissed me out of hand. My mother, however, did not. She listened earnestly as I explained yet again what I had seen. And when I crossed my heart and swore I was not making it up, she knew to believe me. I almost wish she hadn't, if I'm honest. It's why I'm still alive, of course. But it meant the end of everything I knew. The end of school. The end of whatever future I might otherwise have had. The end of life at home. I was whisked away to Foundation containment immediately, placed in a room that is constantly lit. It was odd learning to live that way. To sleep in the light, to adjust your inner clock and circadian rhythms, to relearn existence without that inner cycle that tells you definitively day and night. But of course, I never saw Mr. Spooky again, and for that, I am grateful. I'm one of the lucky ones, you see. One night of terror, and then a lifetime in the light. I got to live, to grow up, to start my own life at the Foundation. Most children with SCP-1819 are not so fortunate. I'm still in the light, of course. I will never again know what it feels like to be in a comforting dark. But perhaps the dark is not all that safe and comforting after all. I have had many years to think about that night, and I have come to a troubling conclusion. I do not believe Mr. Spooky appears only to the infected. I believe he is always there, waiting, watching, lurking, just outside of your sight, in every dark corridor, in every black night. And the only difference between you and the children who you now know suffer is that we were taught where to look.
Excellent pronunciation of pyrimidine, Scott. That's very good, especially given your lack of background in biochemistry. But what have I told you about keeping the endings of the recordings professional?
Yes, yes, ma'am. I'll try to rein it in.
I'm always listening, Scott. Keep that in mind.
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. Mr. Spooky is based on SCP-1819 by Dr. Cuddles from the SCP Wiki located at scp-wiki.com/SCP-1819. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured Justin Gellner as Scott Anderson. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us, email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com, or join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening.